The crystal wine glass shattered against the marble floor as Patricia Vanderbilt screamed at the trembling young waitress. You stupid waitress. Are you a stupid immigrant? Do you have any idea how much this Hermes dress costs? More than your entire worthless family will earn in 10 years. The restaurant fell silent as every diner turned to watch the wealthy socialite berate the 23-year-old server whose only crime had been accidentally brushing Patricia's shoulder while serving soup. What Patricia didn't know, what nobody in that packed Dallas steakhouse knew, except me, Uncle Sam, working security that night, was that the stupid immigrant she was destroying was actually Sofia Ramirez, founder and sole owner of the entire restaurant chain worth $890 million, who'd been working undercover for 8 months to expose exactly this kind of racist abuse her staff endured daily. You see, I'd been working part-time security at Ramirez Steakhouse locations for about 2 years, watching this brilliant entrepreneur build something extraordinary while never forgetting where she came from. And what I knew about Sofia's undercover mission to document how wealthy customers treated invisible service workers was going to blow the lid off some ugly truths about class, race, and the casual cruelty that happens in America's finest restaurants every single night. Before I tell you how this racist socialite's tantrum destroyed her perfect life in the most spectacular way possible, let me ask you something real. Have you ever watched someone treat a waiter or server like garbage just because they could? Drop your city in the comments and tell me about the worst restaurant behavior you've witnessed, because what happened next in that Dallas steakhouse is going to make every customer from Hell Story you've heard look like a pleasant conversation, you know? Now, if you'll excuse an old man for taking a breath here, these stories about immigrants building empires while dealing with racism always hit me different. At my age, having worked alongside people from every country imaginable, I've learned that the folks who work hardest and dream biggest are usually the ones others judge, most harshly based on nothing but accents and skin color. Thank you for bearing with Uncle Sam as I tell you about one of the most satisfying cases of instant karma I ever witnessed. To understand how Sofia Ramirez ended up serving tables in her own restaurant empire, we got to go back about 12 years to when she first arrived in Dallas from Guadalajara, Mexico, with $200 in her pocket, broken English, and dreams bigger than the Texas sky. Sofia was 21 years old, had completed 2 years of culinary school in Mexico, and believed with absolute certainty that America was the place where hard work and talent could overcome any obstacle. The reality she discovered was brutal and unforgiving, right? Sofia's culinary degree from Mexico meant nothing to American employers who assumed that anyone with a Spanish accent was only qualified for dishwashing or bussing tables. Her applications to work as a line cook were rejected by every restaurant she approached, with hiring managers barely glancing at her credentials before telling her the kitchen positions were already filled. She ended up taking the only job available, washing dishes at a mid-level chain restaurant for $7.25 an hour, working split shifts that started at 5 a.m. and ended at midnight, living in a shared apartment with 7 other immigrants who were all chasing the same impossible American dream. The work was backbreaking, the pay was insulting, and the treatment from both management and customers was often openly racist. But Sofia had something that separated her from people who gave up when faced with similar obstacles. She was absolutely relentless about learning, observing, and preparing for the opportunity she knew would eventually come. During her dishwashing shifts, she watched every cook's technique, memorized every recipe, studied how successful restaurants managed their operations. On her days off, she took free English classes at the public library and read everything she could find about restaurant management and business strategy. The breakthrough came when the restaurant's head chef quit unexpectedly during dinner service, leaving the kitchen in chaos with a full dining room and no leadership. Sofia stepped up without being asked, took control of the kitchen, and executed a dinner service that ran more smoothly than anything the restaurant had seen in months. She cooked with the kind of instinctive brilliance that can't be taught, combining Mexican flavors with American expectations in ways that made customers ask for the chef's name. The restaurant's owner, a Greek immigrant named Dimitri Papadopoulos, who'd built his own success from nothing, recognized something special in Sofia's combination of talent, work ethic, and strategic thinking. He promoted her to line cook, then sous chef, then head chef within 18 months, over the objections of kitchen staff who resented taking orders from a young Mexican woman. But Dmitry saw what others missed. Sofia wasn't just a talented cook. She was a natural entrepreneur who understood that restaurants succeed by creating experiences rather than just serving food. She revolutionized the menu, improved kitchen efficiency, and trained staff with a combination of high standards and genuine respect that created loyalty rather than resentment. After 3 years working for Dmitry, Sofia had saved $30,000 and learned everything she needed to know about running a successful restaurant. She approached our mentor with a business proposal that was equal parts brilliant and audacious. She wanted to open a high-end steakhouse that combined Mexican culinary traditions with American steakhouse expectations, targeting the wealthy Dallas market that had never seen anything like what she was planning. Dmitry not only invested $200,000 as a silent partner, but also provided invaluable advice about dealing with suppliers, managing cash flow, and navigating the political realities of Dallas's competitive restaurant scene. The first Ramirez Steakhouse opened in 2015 in the Design District, a risky location that was gentrifying but not yet established as a dining destination. The restaurant was an immediate sensation, attracting attention from food critics who couldn't quite believe that a Mexican immigrant in her mid-20s had created something this sophisticated. Sofia's signature dish, Wagyu beef prepared with mole negro and served with truffle-infused Mexican street corn, became legendary, commanding $180 per plate and earning comparisons to the finest steakhouses in New York or Chicago. But Sofia's success came with a dark side that she hadn't fully anticipated. The wealthier and more exclusive her restaurants became, the more her staff, primarily immigrants like herself, faced casual racism and abuse from customers who viewed servers as servants rather than human beings. Wealthy diners would make racist comments, snap their fingers for service, leave insulting tips, and treat the predominantly Hispanic staff with contempt that was rarely challenged or punished. Sofia heard these stories constantly from her employees, housekeepers, bussers, servers, and kitchen staff who endured daily humiliation from customers who assumed their Spanish accents and brown skin meant they were uneducated and inferior. The complaints were consistent across all her locations, suggesting that this wasn't just isolated incidents, but rather a systemic problem with how wealthy customers treated working-class service staff. The turning point came about 18 months ago, when one of Sofia's best servers, a young single mother named Maria Gonzalez, quit after being reduced to tears by a wealthy customer who berated her for speaking Mexican while taking his order. Maria had been speaking English the entire time, but her accent had apparently offended the customer's sensibilities enough to warrant a 10-minute tirade about immigrants ruining America and taking jobs from real Americans. Sofia tried to convince Maria to stay, offering her a raise and promising to ban the abusive customer, but the damage was done. Maria explained that this wasn't an isolated incident, it was the culmination of hundreds of small cruelties and racist comments she'd endured while serving wealthy diners, who saw her as something less than human. "Miss Sofia," Maria said through her tears, "you built something amazing. But the people who come to your restaurants, they look at us like we're garbage. They make comments about deportation, about how we should go back where we came from, about how we're probably illegal even though most of us are citizens. And management tells us to just smile and take it because these customers spend a lot of money." That conversation haunted Sofia for weeks. She'd spent years building an empire that was supposed to prove that immigrants could achieve anything in America. But in doing so, she created spaces where other immigrants were subjected to the exact kind of discrimination she'd fought so hard to overcome. The irony was painful and unacceptable. That's when Sofia came up with one of the most brilliant undercover operations in restaurant history. Instead of relying on secondhand reports about customer behavior, she would work as an ordinary server in her own restaurants, experiencing firsthand how customers treated staff when they thought nobody important was watching. The evidence she gathered would be used to implement new policies protecting workers from abuse while also exposing the wealthy customers who thought their money gave them permission to treat others like subhumans. Let me pause here for just a moment to catch my breath, because thinking about Sofia's courage still amazes me. At my age, having watched people face down all kinds of injustice, I gotta say, this woman's willingness to put herself through that kind of treatment just to protect her employees is the kind of leadership you don't see very often. She could have just fired a few problem customers and moved on, but instead she chose to really understand what her people were dealing with every single day. Sofia's undercover operation required careful planning and complete commitment. She started by selecting her flagship location in Uptown Dallas, the most expensive and exclusive of her 7 restaurants, where complaints about customer behavior were most frequent. The clientele there included oil executives, real estate developers, professional athletes, and old money families who treated dining out as an opportunity to demonstrate their social superiority. Creating her undercover identity meant suppressing everything that made Sofia Ramirez recognizable as a successful entrepreneur. She let her expensive highlights grow out, revealing her natural black hair. She stopped wearing the designer clothes and jewelry that had become her signature as a businesswoman. She adopted the slightly deferential posture that servers developed from years of navigating customer egos and kitchen hierarchies. The transformation was remarkable. Sofia went from looking like a successful restaurateur, featured in magazines, to looking like any of the dozens of anonymous servers working in her establishments. She was still beautiful, still obviously intelligent, but in the kind of way that wealthy customers train themselves not to notice about working class people. Getting hired as a server in her own restaurant required working through the staffing agency that handled her hiring. Using her legal name, Sofia Maria Ramirez Guerrero, instead of the shortened Sofia Ramirez she used professionally. The hiring manager, who'd never met the company's reclusive owner, hired her based on her previous restaurant experience, without recognizing who she actually was. My involvement in Sofia's undercover operation began during her second week as a server, when I noticed something odd about the new girl, who moved through the dining room with the kind of strategic awareness that comes from understanding restaurant operations at a management level, rather than just following protocols. She anticipated problems before they developed, helped other servers without being asked, and navigated difficult customers with techniques that suggested experience dealing with entitled people. I'd been working security at Ramirez Steakhouse locations for 2 years by that point, and I'd gotten pretty good at reading people and recognizing when someone wasn't quite what they appeared to be. This new server was too good, too strategic, too obviously intelligent to be satisfied with a job that most people viewed as temporary or transitional. I decided to watch her more carefully, and that's when I noticed the small details that didn't quite fit. The expensive watch she wore despite being a relatively new hire. The way she sometimes forgot to maintain her server persona and gave instructions with the natural authority of someone used to running things. Most tellingly, the fact that she seemed to be documenting everything, taking mental notes about customer behavior and staff interactions with the focus of someone conducting research rather than just trying to earn tips. One night after closing, I approached her while she was doing her side work, prepping for the next day's service. "Miss Ramirez," I said quietly, using her real name and watching her reaction carefully. "You're either the world's most overqualified server, or you're conducting an investigation that I should probably know about since I'm responsible for security in this building." Sofia froze mid-motion, clearly calculating whether I was a threat to her undercover operation or a potential ally. "How long have you known?" she asked, dropping the server persona entirely. "About 5 days," I replied. "Your technique is good, but you occasionally forget to hide your natural leadership presence. Plus, you asked questions last week about our security. Camera coverage that no ordinary server would think to ask unless they were either planning a robbery or conducting surveillance." Sofia studied me for a long moment, probably remembering that Dimitri had specifically recommended me when she was setting up security for her restaurants. "Sam, right? Dimitri said you were one of the few people in this business who actually cared about doing the right." thing rather than just collecting a paycheck. That reference to her mentor sealed our partnership right there. Sofia explained her undercover mission to document how customers treated servers, and I agreed to help by making sure security footage captured the incidents she was experiencing while maintaining her cover as an ordinary employee. We became unlikely partners in exposing the casual racism and classism that infected even the finest restaurants. Over the next 6 months, Sophia experienced treatment that ranged from mildly disrespectful to outrightly abusive. She was snapped at, talked down to, had racist comments directed at her accent, faced assumptions about her immigration status, and endured the kind of casual cruelty that wealthy people inflict when they believe the target is powerless to respond. One particularly ugly incident involved a group of wealthy businessmen who spent their entire meal making increasingly inappropriate comments about Sophia's appearance, asking invasive questions about her background, and speculating loudly about whether she was legal or one of those anchor babies. When Sophia maintained her professional composure and refused to engage with their harassment, they left her a $1 tip on a $600 bill with a note saying, "Go back to Mexico." Another regular customer, an oil executive named Richard Hartford, seemed to take personal pleasure in making servers uncomfortable with his combination of sexual harassment and racist comments. He'd request Spanish-speaking servers specifically so he could mock their accents, make jokes about wetbacks, and generally demonstrate his belief that his wealth entitled him to treat working people however he wanted. But the customer who would ultimately star in Sophia's most spectacular exposure of racist behavior was Patricia Vanderbilt, a 47-year-old socialite who'd married into Dallas old money and spent her days shopping, day drinking, and finding creative ways to demonstrate her superiority over people she considered beneath her social class. Patricia was what you'd call a regular nightmare. She came to Ramirez Steakhouse at least twice a week, always demanding the best table, always finding something to complain about, always treating servers with the kind of contempt that suggested she genuinely believed they were a lower form of human being. Other servers actively avoided being assigned to her table because the experience was so consistently degrading. Sophia volunteered to serve Patricia multiple times, documenting each interaction and building a comprehensive profile of exactly how this wealthy socialite treated working class people when she thought nobody important was watching. The pattern was consistent and disturbing. Patricia used racial slurs when she thought other customers couldn't hear, made assumptions about servers' immigration status, complained about having to listen to Spanish in what she considered an American restaurant, and generally behaved like a character from a movie about racist Southern aristocracy. The confrontation that would expose Patricia's racism and entitlement began on a busy Saturday night when the restaurant was completely booked with wealthy diners celebrating everything from anniversaries to business deals. Patricia arrived with 3 friends, all of them clearly several drinks into what had been a long afternoon of wine tasting and shopping. Sophia was assigned to their table, and trouble started before they'd even looked at the menu. Patricia immediately complained that the table wasn't good enough, that the lighting was unflattering, that she could hear kitchen noise, that the temperature wasn't right. Each complaint was delivered with the imperious tone of someone accustomed to having every whim immediately accommodated. "Listen here, sweetheart," Patricia said when Sophia tried to explain that the restaurant was fully booked and no other tables were available. "I don't think you understand who you're talking to. I've been coming to this restaurant since before you crawled across the border, and I expect a certain level of service that clearly isn't part of your training down in whatever village you escaped from." Sophia maintained her professional composure, apologizing for the inconvenience and promising to ensure their dining experience was excellent despite the seating situation. But Patricia was drunk enough and entitled enough that no amount of professional service was going to satisfy her need to dominate and demean. The abuse escalated throughout the evening. Patricia snapped her fingers to get Sophia's attention, corrected her pronunciation of menu items with exaggerated mockery, made comments about these people while gesturing at Sophia and other Latino staff members, and generally behaved like someone auditioning for the role of villain in a movie about workplace discrimination. Her friends were clearly uncomfortable with Patricia's behavior, but too socially dependent on her to speak up or leave. They laughed weakly at her racist jokes, tried to change the subject when she got too aggressive, and generally enabled her cruelty through their silence and complicity. The incident that would go viral and destroy Patricia's life happened when Sofia was serving the main course. Patricia's $180 Wagyu steak prepared with the mole negro that had made the restaurant famous. As Sofia carefully placed the plate in front of Patricia, the socialite shifted suddenly in her seat, causing Sofia's hand to briefly brush against her shoulder. Patricia exploded with the kind of rage that suggested she'd been waiting all evening for an excuse to completely dominate someone she viewed as inferior. "You stupid immigrant." She screamed, loud enough that the entire restaurant fell silent. "Do you have any idea how much this Hermes dress costs? More than your entire worthless family will earn in 10 years. Sofia stepped back, maintaining her composure while Patricia continued her tirade. The socialite's friends tried to calm her down, but she was too far gone into her racist tantrum to be reasoned with. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Patricia announced to the now silent dining room. "These illegals come to our country, take our jobs, and can't even serve a plate without assaulting customers. I want this woman fired immediately, and I want the manager to come explain to me why they're employing people who clearly don't belong in a civilized establishment." The racism was blatant and undeniable now, with Patricia using every dog whistle and slur she could think of while maintaining the pretense that her rage was about the dress, rather than her xenophobia. Other diners were recording the scene on their phones, and several looked like they wanted to intervene but weren't sure how to handle the situation. That's when I decided I'd watched enough and stepped forward to end the circus before Patricia could dig herself any deeper. I'd been positioned near the bar, monitoring the situation and making sure our security cameras captured every moment of Patricia's racist meltdown. "Mrs. Vanderbilt," I said loudly enough to cut through her ranting, "I think you need to calm down and reconsider what you're saying right now. You're making some serious accusations against an employee who's done nothing except provide excellent service while enduring your harassment all evening." Patricia whirled to face me, fury radiating from every pore. "And who the hell are you? Some rent-a-cop who thinks he can tell me how to behave? I spend thousands of dollars at this restaurant every month, which means I can treat the staff however I want. Now, get me the manager before I have you fired along with this incompetent waitress." "I'm Sam Rodriguez, head of security for Ramirez Steakhouse," I replied calmly. "And I'm telling you that the woman you just called stupid, illegal, and incompetent is actually Sofia Ramirez, the founder and owner of this restaurant and the entire 7-location chain that you've been spending thousands of dollars every month." The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Patricia's face went through about 6 different expressions in 10 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, calculation, panic, and finally the dawning horror of someone who realizes they've just destroyed their own life on camera in front of hundreds of witnesses. Sofia stepped forward, pulling off her server apron and letting her natural authority show through for the first time since starting her undercover operation. Even without the expensive clothes and professional styling, once you knew who you were looking at, the resemblance to the woman whose photograph hung in the restaurant's entrance was obvious. "Hello, Patricia," Sofia said, her voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that comes from experiencing racism personally rather than just hearing about it secondhand. "I've been serving your table tonight, and I've been serving you regularly for the past 6 months, while working undercover to document exact experiences from customers like you." Patricia tried to speak, but only managed to produce stammering sounds that conveyed her growing panic. Her friends had already started backing away, clearly calculating how to distance themselves from someone who just committed career suicide in the most public way possible. "For 6 months, Sofia continued, I've listened to you make racist comments, use racial slurs when you thought other customers couldn't hear, make assumptions about my immigration status. I'm a U.S. citizen, by the way, and generally treat me and other staff members like we're subhuman servants who exist only to validate your sense of superiority. Sofia then pulled out her phone and played a compilation video that I'd edited from security footage over the past 6 months. The video showed Patricia making racist comments, using slurs, harassing servers, and generally behaving like a character from a documentary about American racism. The footage was damning and undeniable, showing pattern after pattern of discriminatory behavior. This video, Sofia announced to the dining room full of shocked customers. Along with tonight's performance will be submitted to the Better Business Bureau, shared with the media, and posted on social media so that everyone can see exactly what kind of person you are when you think the people you're abusing are powerless to fight back. Patricia finally found her voice, but only to make things worse. This is entrapment. You can't just disguise yourself and spy on customers. I'll sue you for everything you have. My husband's lawyers will destroy you. Sofia's response was devastating in its simplicity. Patricia, I wasn't conducting a criminal investigation. I was working as an employee in my own business, which I have every legal right to do, and I wasn't spying on you. I was simply existing as a Latina woman in America and experiencing how people like you treat people like me when you think we can't fight back. The reference to people like you and people like me crystallized exactly what had happened. This wasn't just about a rude customer. It was about systematic racism, about the casual cruelty that wealthy white people inflict on working-class immigrants, about the assumption that brown skin and an accent automatically mean inferiority and powerlessness. Furthermore, Sofia continued, you're banned from every Ramirez steakhouse location permanently. Your husband, your friends, anyone associated with you, banned. I've already instructed my staff at all 7 locations that you're not welcome in our establishments. And I'll be sharing your photograph with other restaurant owners who might want to know about customers who abuse their staff. Patricia's meltdown was complete now. The wealthy socialite who'd entered the restaurant, expecting to demonstrate her superiority, was being publicly humiliated and permanently excluded from one of Dallas's most prestigious dining destinations. Her friends had abandoned her, other customers were recording her disgrace, and the servers she tormented were watching with barely concealed satisfaction. You can't do this to me, Patricia screamed, her voice breaking with desperation. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my husband is? We have connections. We have power. You're just some immigrant who got lucky, and you're going to regret crossing Patricia Vanderbilt. Sofia's final response was delivered with the quiet authority of someone who'd overcome every obstacle that racism and classism could throw at her. Patricia, I know exactly who you are. You're someone who thought your money and social status gave you permission to treat other human beings like garbage. And yes, I'm an immigrant who got lucky by working 18-hour days for years, building something of value through talent and determination, and never forgetting that my success doesn't make me better than the people who work for me. As for your threats about power and connections, Sofia added, I've spent the past 8 years building relationships with business leaders, politicians, and community organizations throughout Dallas. My restaurants employ over 400 people, most of them immigrants like myself, and we're part of the economic and cultural fabric of this city. So please go ahead and use your connections. I'd love to see how that works out for you. Security escorted Patricia from the restaurant while she continued threatening lawsuits and promising revenge. Her humiliation was complete, captured on dozens of phones and destined to go viral within hours. The other diners remained silent until she was gone, then burst into applause for Sofia's handling of the situation. The aftermath of Patricia's public meltdown was swift and comprehensive. The video of her racist tirade went viral immediately, generating millions of views and universal condemnation from people horrified by her casual cruelty and blatant discrimination. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about wealthy people's mistreatment of service workers and the racism that still infected American society. Patricia's social position collapsed within days. Her wealthy friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with someone who'd become a symbol of racist entitlement. Charities removed her from their boards. Country clubs revoked her memberships. Even her own family was reportedly mortified by her behavior and the damage she'd done to their reputation. Her husband, Richard Vanderbilt, a corporate attorney who built his career on maintaining discretion and respectability, filed for divorce within 2 weeks. The legal documents specifically cited Patricia's public behavior bringing disrepute to the family name, and her pattern of racist conduct inconsistent with our family values. The financial settlement was reportedly far less generous than Patricia would have received under normal circumstances. But Sofia's victory wasn't just about Patricia's destruction. It was about creating systematic change in how restaurants handled customer abuse of staff. She used the publicity from the incident to announce new policies across all her locations that empowered employees to refuse service to customers who engaged in harassment, discrimination, or abuse. The Ramirez Standard, as it became known in the restaurant industry, included several revolutionary provisions. Staff could immediately escalate any customer displaying racist, sexist, or abusive behavior to management. Management was required to support the staff member and remove the abusive customer. Customers who were banned for discrimination would have their information shared with a network of participating restaurants, creating consequences that extended beyond a single establishment. Most significantly, Sofia established a legal defense fund that would provide free legal representation to any service industry worker who faced retaliation for refusing to tolerate abuse from customers. The fund was initially capitalized with $5 million and grew rapidly as other successful immigrants in business owners contributed. The broader impact of Sofia's undercover operation extended far beyond her own restaurants. Her story became a catalyst for conversations about how service workers are treated in America, particularly immigrants and people of color who face not just difficult customers, but also systemic racism disguised as normal business interactions. Labor organizations used Sofia's footage and testimony to push for stronger protections for service workers, including legal recourse against customers who engage in discriminatory harassment. Several states passed legislation specifically addressing customer abuse of restaurant workers, with penalties ranging from fines to criminal charges for egregious cases. The restaurant industry itself began reevaluating the customer is always right philosophy that had enabled abusive behavior for generations. Trade organizations developed training programs teaching managers how to support staff against discrimination while maintaining excellent service for reasonable customers. Sofia's restaurants thrived in the aftermath of the controversy, with business increasing as customers who valued ethical treatment of workers specifically chose Ramirez Steakhouse locations. The publicity also attracted attention from investors who wanted to expand her concept to other markets, offers that Sofia carefully evaluated to ensure any expansion maintained her commitment to worker dignity. Patricia Vanderbilt, meanwhile, essentially disappeared from Dallas society. Reports suggested she'd moved to another city where her viral infamy was less well known, though the video of her racist meltdown remained easily searchable online, permanently attached to her name. Several news outlets tracked her down for follow-up interviews, but she refused to comment beyond claiming she'd been taken out of context. The taken out of context defense became a punchline in discussions about racism and accountability, with commentators noting that there was no context that could justify calling stupid and illegal based on their ethnicity and accent. Patricia's attempt to portray herself as the victim only generated more anger and reinforced why Sofia's undercover operation had been necessary. Years later, the incident remained a landmark case in discussions about workplace discrimination, immigrant experiences, and the power dynamics between wealthy customers and working-class service staff. Business schools use Sofia's strategic thinking as a case study in ethical leadership and stakeholder management. Law schools analyzed the legal implications of her undercover operation and the resulting policy changes. Sofia herself continued building her restaurant empire, while maintaining her commitment to worker dignity and immigrant rights. She became a sought-after speaker on topics ranging from entrepreneurship to social justice, always emphasizing that her success was built on the same hard work and determination that every immigrant worker demonstrated daily in America's restaurants, hotels, and service industries. The Maria Gonzalez who'd quit after facing racist abuse returned to work at Ramirez Steakhouse after Sofia's new policies were implemented, eventually becoming a general manager overseeing 3 locations. Her journey from tearful resignation to leadership position symbolized the transformative impact of protecting workers from discrimination rather than forcing them to endure it. As I reflect on this case years later, I'm struck by how Sofia's willingness to experience abuse firsthand created change that no amount of secondhand reporting could have achieved. By literally putting herself in her employees' shoes, or rather, their server aprons, she gathered evidence and understanding that transformed not just her own business, but influenced an entire industry. The investigation reminded me that privilege becomes powerful when it's used to protect rather than dominate, and that the best leaders are those who remember where they came from even after achieving success. Sofia could have stayed comfortable in her executive suite, but instead she chose to walk alongside her workers through the discrimination they faced. So, what do you think about how customers treat service workers? And have you ever witnessed racism or abuse in restaurants or other service settings? Have you been on the receiving end of that kind of treatment or seen someone else go through it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what city you're watching from and share any experiences you've had with people who thought their money gave them permission to treat others like they were less than human. But before you go, I need to tell you about Uncle Sam's next investigation, because it involves something that will remind you that hidden wealth and quiet dignity can destroy loud arrogance faster than anything else. Picture this: a corporate executive's trophy wife who regularly mocked what she thought was a poor janitor with cheap clothes and humble work, not knowing that the quiet man she humiliated daily was actually worth $50 million and was about to teach her the most expensive lesson about judging people by their appearance, right? Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because Uncle Sam's next story exposes eyewitness executive's wife mock janitor. His real net worth was $50 million. The lesson from Sofia Ramirez and Patricia Vanderbilt's story remains clear. Treating people with cruelty when you think they're powerless says everything about your character and nothing about their worth. Because sometimes the stupid immigrant you're screaming at owns the entire empire you're standing in. And sometimes karma arrives disguised as a server's apron and a smartphone recording every racist word you say, bro. And sometimes it takes an old security guard with 40 years of experience watching human nature to recognize that the most powerful person in the room is often the one everyone's ignoring while they serve your dinner.